Tonight we are joined by Dr. Jeffrey Wilkinson, who's an American Jew who lives in Canada. We will not hold the American part against him. He holds a doctorate in education from the University of Toronto and works actively in the Jewish community and beyond issues relating to trauma and the Israel-Palestine struggle. Also, we have Raja Khoury, who is the CEO of Khoury Conversations. Raja is a human rights and inclusion consultant. I would call him an activist too. He was the founding president of the Canadian Arab Institute, a board member of Project Rozana, former 10-year commissioner with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. He is also a Canada Committee member of Human Rights Watch and a co-founder of the Canadian Arab Jewish Leadership Dialogue Group. Welcome, Raja and Jeffrey. It is, I wouldn't say it's a pleasure. There is nothing that brings pleasure to anyone these days. It is not definitely a good time to talk. The reason I wanted to talk to the two of you is because the two of you authored this book, which I have in my hand, The Wall Between, that was titled, What Jews and Palestinians Do Not Want to Know About Each Other. The book came out, I believe, October the 4th or the 3rd, and then the 3rd. And then October the 7th happened. So without further ado, let's dive into this. What went through your mind when October the 7th happened? What did you think of what was happening, and how do you relate your book and your efforts into that?
Well, of course, there's the personal and the professional. And of course, the personal was the events on October 7th and every day since. The professional in us, of course, tried to remain true to the message of our book, which is, it's being, needing to understand and empathize with the other, and being driven by justice and the values that we believe in as Canadians, of respect and human rights and freedom, democracy. A bit of a challenge to try and maintain that professional profile with all of the horrible things happening over there. The silver lining was in the fact that these events made our book very relevant and important to the point to the moment that we're in, because in the book we practically describe how the two communities are currently reacting to each other before October 7 happened.
Wow. And Jeff?
The word that comes to mind is, well, there are many, is dislocation. A feeling of that the moment would be fixated, that October 7th would become the only thing that we talk about, and that every notion would start and begin as if October 7th happened in a vacuum. So I was constantly feeling this dislocation of being placed in this, these terrible people did a terrible thing, as if terrible things have not been happening for a long time. And I'm constantly feeling like I need to pull people back into see October 7th, as horrible as it certainly is for many, and well, for all humans, to see suffering in this level, to instead see October 7th as a result of constant 75 years of injustice, oppression, pain. For my community, I knew as it did would throw us back to the Holocaust, to our 3,000 years of feeling oppressed, displaced, less than, would bring up our fears, would take this sort of toxic mix of deep pain and victimhood and a system of power that had the ability to inflict tremendous harm on others. So instead of just being able to sit back, reflect, heal, cry, do whatever we need to do, we were immediately thrown into the storm of war, of violence, of bombing, of terrible destruction on an innocent group of people who aren't themselves responsible for October 7th. So I think I'm constantly feeling like the world is telling me I should be thinking about October 7th, and I need to keep saying, look at this in a bigger context. And that doesn't make me less sympathetic to Israel or to Jews, or, at the stretch make me anti-Semitic because I want a ceasefire. It instead reminds me that things happen as a symptom of a larger picture. So I feel really compelled to take the microscope and expand it out to a larger picture so that we can talk about that and not just about this immediate trauma.
So, in in the context of what is going on, and in exactly following up on what you said, you will find that the two communities have the same story. And what happened since October the 7th and on October the 7th have done nothing but deepen our beliefs. So the Jewish community, and I'm going to talk about Canada. The Jewish community is living in the world where Israel is always attacked, and Israel needs to defend itself. And October the 7th did nothing but entrench that. And the Palestinian and Arab community is always under the impression, that's the idea we have, is that Israel is an occupation oppressive force that holds no value for our lives, and it treats us as subhumans, and they are the jailer, and the rest of it. And what happened after October the 7th did nothing but entrench these things to us. And the hostility aside, there is a huge level of pain and trauma in both communities. I don't know what's happening in the Jewish community. I'm not Jewish. I can tell you I have friends who stop sleeping in their beds. They sleep on the floor because they feel guilty in Toronto because of the pain. And I'm sure the Jewish community has something similar that goes through them. How would we discuss? How do we do this? How do we talk to each other in that environment without being insensitive? How can I talk to somebody who is suffering, who's in pain, who's has this mixed anger and emotion, anger and painful emotions inside them, and tell them we need to talk to the other person?
It's absolutely. I actually want to hear a lot more from Raja, but what I'm going to say just very briefly is that the Jewish community that is Zionist, generally pro-Israel, has reacted exactly the way you've framed. But the Jewish community that has been really worried about the impact of Zionism on Palestinians has also become very energized since October 7th. And many in my community, even though they're still a minority, have really raised their voices. As the bombings continue to get worse, as starvation and other things happen. So the Jewish community has kind of been split. The larger segment has been more victimized, more protective, but a smaller segment has really been energized and really been quite powerful in their statements and in their actions. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, we will definitely explore that later, I'm sure. Raja.
Yeah, if you were a Palestinian who has never spoken to a Jew, or a Zionist, I should say, then today is probably not the right time for you to do that. The idea of in our book is that sooner or later, the two Canadian communities, one Jewish and one Palestinian/Arab, need to understand each other and how and why they react to events, even to words, like from the river to the sea, um, so that the two communities here are not at war with each other, that Palestinians and Israelis are at war with each other over there. We don't have to live in that war mentality because we're actually not in a state of war. We are Canadian communities who live side by side. Of course, our loyalties, our sympathies, our concern for people over there is always active and is always impacting how we relate to each other. But the idea is for me to understand why I'm reacting the way I am, how trauma is playing into my reactions, how much am I being influenced by pressure from my tribe, and how much am I being influenced by propaganda, especially disinformation that's it's plentiful out there. These things that we need to understand about ourselves and about the other, so that we can at least find some common ground to exist peacefully and in social harmony as Canadians who live in the same city or in the same town. We're not trying to resolve the Israel-Palestine struggle today, but we're trying to get, Canadian communities here to have better relations that maybe in an ideal world we'll have them one day working together to bring peace over there and to bring justice to people over there. That's my dream, and right now I'm sure it sounds like fantasy, but we really cannot afford not to have hope. We have to have hope.
All right.
Hey,
So, sorry, go ahead, Jeffrey.
no, it's okay. Did you want to go somewhere else?
No, I wanted to take this and move it forward.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I,
excellent. So,
yeah, I think what Roger really started on was the human connection. That to focus on each other on a human level. There is literally this noise that is like this intense buzz that is surrounding the conversation that makes it so, if you can imagine a large construction site with cranes and jackhammers going, and then two people having a whisper conversation in the middle of it, you can't hear them because all you're hearing is the noise. And I think what Raj and I's focus has really been is about moving the noise out of the way long enough to create a connection around suffering, trauma, pain, grief, fear, which both communities are experiencing. We also have to resist this notion that because you empathize with the other, you are being disloyal or somehow not being strong enough, against the oppressor or whatever evil you are fighting. We have seen too much of strident this or that. Not, I feel really strongly about this, but I know you also feel strongly. Some of us seem to think that being right is more important than being better.
excellent. So I'm going to go and follow on the same theme. And I'm going to say, so you two have talked. You seem to have been lucky to been able to talk, to have been able to talk before all the emotional stress happened. And you wrote a book, and I don't want you to give the book away. I'm sure it's good for people to read the book and buy it. But if there is something that a Jew or an Arab, and since I have the two of you here, or a Palestinian to be specific, a Jew and a Palestinian want to tell each other, to tell their community, since you two have talked, Jeffrey and Raja, I want you to come back and tell respective communities, at least here right now, one thing or two, if you like, that you discovered in the conversation that you went like, if we did not have that conversation, I would have never understood that. I always misunderstood that. And I want to frame this in that we don't do this in defense of one community or the other. We're not defending a certain community against the other, and we're not attacking ideas. We're doing this in the spirit of, if we understand each other better, we feel better about ourselves. And it's not an easy exercise. So I'll let you decide who wants to go first, and I'm going to be glad to listen.
I was going to ask you to tell us with who do you want to go first.
Yeah. And I was going to say I want you to go first.
Okay, so we have agreement on that. Very good. First things I learned when I started dialogue with Jewish colleagues, and that was like 17 years ago now, is that the word Zionism has not had an absolute meaning to everyone. Palestinian and to pretty much everyone in my community, Zionism is a swear word. It's a bad word. If you want to insult someone, you describe him as to Palestinians, Zionists are the cause of their dispossession, the cause of the destruction of their society in 1948, the cause behind the occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, and the oppression that comes with that. So there's a long list of deep grievances there. I talked to one of my Jewish colleagues, and she told me that to her was Zionism is the right for Jews to have a home where they can be safe. This is something I'd never heard before. To more and more Jews or Zionists, I realized that it means different things to different people. To some Zionists, it's a very it's a supremacy of Jews over everyone else, and and Jewish exceptionalism, which of course I would reject completely. But to other Zionists, it's that right to have a safe place to call home, be able to go and shelter in if need be, and it does. They don't hate Palestinians. I'm not saying that all Zionists don't. I'm talking about some Zionists who are progressive Zionists. They want for Palestinians largely the same things that they want for themselves. And what Zionism has provided to Israelis, today. So, and these are people that I think you can find common ground with, despite disagreements. And these are people that, I think should give us as Palestinians cause to not lump all Zionists together and discount people just for the mere fact of having Zionist sentiments.
Thank you. I've learned a lot, but I'll start with this. Early on, even though I had some notion of this, I didn't get how clearly Palestinians separate Zionism from Judaism. The mainstream voice in the Jewish community, in my community, that have insisted on linking the two. And for Palestinians, the resistance to Zionism is a natural resistance to oppression, loss of land, loss of space, loss of identity, loss of all the things that we need and crave as humans. It has nothing to do with disliking Jews as a people. And while that may seem very obvious, it is so ingrained through these messaging from many in the Jewish community that this anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism are just two birds of the same feather. And they're not. And I think I've continued to develop my deep understanding of that. The second thing I learned specifically from Raja is that he can be deeply angry at the actions of Israel and deeply loving towards Jews at the same time, in the same breath, which is why I see his tremendous courage, his steadfastness, his ability to push through great pain. He'll call me and tell me how angry he is, how hurt he is. And then he'll see something about someone mistreating a Jewish person. And he'll show that Jewish person the same empathy that he's showing his community. And by his values, not by his tribe.
And I like my Palestinian brothers and sisters to never forget that the best defenders of Palestinian rights here in North America have been Jews. If you think about it, the best defenders, and today you see that in independent Jewish Voices for Peace, Peter Beinart, Noam Chomsky, and the list is long. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Jeffrey, is there anything else that you want to elaborate on, like a term that you find in the Jewish community that maybe from your discussions with Raja, just like Raja said, hey, the word Zionism, and by the way, Raja said it's in Palestinian minds, offensive, and it represents colonialism and oppression. It is in the Arab collective mind. I can tell you, as we say, from the Gulf to the ocean, with a big, huge concept there that Raja is trying to dismantle. Are there any concepts on your side that you think, hey, this is something that we fear, that we dislike, that I think I can change?
I think the prime terms of, well, let's do one that's the most present right now, genocide. Majority of Jews, the accusation of genocide lands as a dismissal of our great genocide, the Holocaust. That when you put it in the same breath, you are minimizing or dismissing Jewish suffering. I say to my community, like Palestinians did not participate in the Holocaust, are not responsible for it. Attacks, the bombing, the supposed, whatever you want to call the military objectives, have the effect, the impact of genocide. This is agreed by most international. We are not protecting human life. And we're saying, we as in those who support Israel, not me personally, that this is a necessary action in order to defeat an enemy. And I want to say that if our values, and they are as Jews, are about life, then we must apply those values equally. And when somebody says, this is a genocide, and you feel triggered, and take a breath and ask how you would feel if somebody was upset with you calling the experiences of Jews in the Holocaust, not saying the two are the same, genocide. This is the experience of the people. This is the action that is currently being done. And we are big enough to take the term and instead of making us angry and victimized, it should enliven us to work together to demand an immediate and full ceasefire, because that's the only way to stop the killing. And we have become complicit in this sort of Western notion of defense. And I want to say to my community that you can love Jewishness, you can even love the idea of a homeland for Jews and a safety for Jews, and say that this is foundationally wrong and must stop.
Excellent. This is very powerful, and it lands on something that not just Jewish community in relationship to Israel, but on almost every Arab, I can tell you, it's a shared concern where when we criticize the actions of the governments, sometimes you get lobbed the accusation of not liking your country or hating your country, while in reality, you are actually, that's a sign of love. That's a sign of actually deep love for the country. I'm going to go finally with another question again for both of you. one of my goals of starting this podcast was to shed light on the bright spots of our communities, of the things that are going right. There is enough darkness out there in the Canadian context. Sadly, there are bad examples. Just go to Twitter and you will be very sad. I am very sad. But there are a lot of good things that happen in Canada that not a lot of people know about. And I want to start. I don't know which one of you want to go first. Let me pick for you this time. Let's start with Raja again this time, because before Jeffrey starts to talk, I want to introduce you in a different way. I have something in mind. Go ahead, Raja.
Yes, there are good things happening. Um, a group called Coexistence, another group called Standing Together here in Canada that is in support of a movement in Israel called Standing Together. It's a movement made up of Palestinian and Jewish citizens of Israel, trained aim to push for full democracy in Israel, equality for all citizens, ending the occupation, release the hostages, of course. Um, it's a relatively new movement, and it's growing very quickly, and it's worth our attention. Groups working sort of under the radar, like Heart to Heart, and to bring Palestinians and Jews, or Palestinians and Israeli Jews together. I'm on the board of a Canadian charity called Rozana Canada, previously Project Rozana. And Rozana is an international organization that works to build a personal relationship between Israelis and Palestinians through healthcare. So we provide opportunities for patients who can't get the treatment they need in the West Bank or Gaza to go get treated in Israel or in Jerusalem. Opportunities for healthcare professionals, that brings people from both sides, allows opportunities. We create opportunities for Palestinian health professionals to go work in hospitals in Israel to learn certain expertise, providing services for Palestinian women in remote locations that don't have access to healthcare. This is an organization that's doing good, that's helping, mostly helping Palestinians at the health level, but also creating interactions between people that are within a professional context that do not have the oppression of the occupation embedded in them, that do not have a Jewish soldier with a machine gun pointing it at you at a checkpoint. Solve a problem. I think any opportunity to remind people of the humanity of the other, a humanity that is clearly lacking today in what we see and happening in Gaza. At the humanity of each other, because really nothing good can happen out of that. Nothing good.
I fully agree. I remember I was really touched by watching a video on Project Rosanna, and while the video was focused on mostly how it is helping Palestinians and Palestinian patients because of the lack of funding and lack of and how vulnerable the healthcare system, and it was in Gaza as well, if I'm wrong, Gaza and the West Bank.
It's
Palestinians from both sides have been moved to Israel, taking to receive healthcare. What really touched me the most, I believe, was a part where one of the doctors in the Israeli hospital said it is very important for him that Israeli patients get treated by Palestinian doctors who are working in the hospital, because we need to establish this parity and a little bit of symmetry in a world that is extremely asymmetric when the balance of power is completely broken. Okay, so Jeff, I wanted you to introduce the New Israel Fund, if you don't mind. But before I want you to introduce it, I want to tell everyone a funny story. So I am an Arab, and I am very pro-Palestinian, and my wife knows that, and she is also. And one day, we received mail, and I'm opening the mail in the kitchen, and it was a letter from the New Israel Fund coming to me asking me to donate money. And it was a weekend, and we're drinking coffee, and like she almost dropped the coffee cup as seeing the big, Star of David, and we want you to pay money. And he's like, are you paying money to Zionists in my home? I want to take a picture of this. I will tell your mom. So, before my wife goes and tells my mom that I am supporting Zionists in Israel, tell us more about the New Israel Fund so maybe I can defend myself a little bit here.
You, either side has our purists, right? So the New Israel Fund is an American organization that has an outfit in Canada called New Israel Fund Canada. Primarily fund human rights and social justice projects in Israel, and they also do quite a bit of work here. They are aimed at a more egalitarian shared society. Are the Zionists that Raja was talking about, that have a little earlier, that have deep hearts, that care very deeply for Jews and Palestinians as human. And I also understand the resistance to a name of a group called the New Israel Fund with a Star of David and Mogen David on the cover. I get that, and I have myself been somewhat reticent with organizations like NIFC and J-Space Canada that are progressive Zionist organizations, because sometimes I focus a little more on the Zionism and a little less on the progressive part. But I think it's really important to know that we have a big problem which needs big players and a large tent. And that we don't all have to come at it from the same way. And in my experience, groups like New Israel Fund are well organized, very well intentioned, have some funding, and have the ability to get things done. And that we should support every organization that is doing this, even if they don't match perfectly with our particular politics.
Thank you. I would love to talk to you guys for hours. And I have probably tried to do that before in person, but that is not the right format for it. I want to thank both of you because the sad part of the suffering and pain that we have now around us and that we feel personally is that it is driving us apart, driving us into anger and hate. And the fact that you two exist and the work you do, it's instrumental and it is very important in just bridging the gap between our two communities. It is very important for us in Canada to remember that what unites us is human rights, equality, the Canadian values, in the words of the great Martin Luther King, may this nation live up to its creed. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. This was great. And I look forward to seeing you in person soon.